This Gamekey was provided by the MetaQuest Creator Program. Ember Souls is a new hack-and-slash adventure from VirtualAge, the makers of Guardians Frontline for MetaQuest 3. I'm sad to say that this game pretty much bored me to tears, and I felt like I was playing an inferior version of other, much better games. I'm live open mic, let's talk about it. In Ember Souls, you play as Kasim, the requisitely chosen one tasked to recover the Ember Stones, 4 of which represent elemental abilities for your character: water, wind, fire, and earth. At your side is Alshane, the spirit of the Windstone, the first one you get in the game, and it's represented as a glowing bird. Alshane delivers the lion's share of the game's exposition and gives you hints if you find yourself stuck and unsure how to progress. There's a bunch of reasons why I didn't enjoy this game, but let's start with the graphics. I do want to credit VirtualAge for offering a slew of settings to tweak the graphics, although there's a disclaimer that turning anything up or changing anything will affect the game's performance and or make it unstable. This is something you typically don't see on the Quest game, it's usually reserved for PC VR. For purposes of this review, the only thing I tweaked was turning the fixed foveated rendering from high down to medium because my eyes would hurt if I looked at the environments by moving my eyes instead of moving my entire head. Having said all that, this game is just plain ugly and not in a charming way. The textures are all low resolution with very little detail. The character models are especially bad. Ironically, the non-human enemies like the skeletons you see here look and feel way more naturally than the human characters. There's a really cool mechanic where you can jump to a banner and slide down as it rips from your body weight. Unfortunately, it's ruined by how bad the ripping effect appears right in front of your eyes. All the lighting here is baked. The human characters move so robotically and they have that old world VR gliding look where it looks more like they're gliding or skating over the ground instead of walking. When you kill enemies, the blood spatter is laughably bad. The weapons look okay, but really that's about it. And at this point of standalone VR gaming, we should expect and get better than this. Gameplay wise, VirtualAge said they took inspirations from games like Assassin's Creed and Prince of Persia. But unfortunately, similar to the last game, Guardians Frontline being inspired by Halo and StarCraft, Ember Souls just plays like a worse version of the games it's inspired by. I'll start with the combat. I love melee combat in VR games when it's done well, but by my 5th battle in this game I was already bored. All I had to do was run at an enemy and stab forward, and I killed, I'd say probably about 80% of them in one attack. Occasionally I went for a decapitation, but there's no satisfaction to it. Everything's just very floaty with no weight or impact to it. This game badly needs a true physics engine. Also, I did a wiggle physics test where I just wiggle my sword back and forth in front of an enemy to see if I can kill it that way, and this game unfortunately fails that test. I hate wiggle physics in melee combat. It's why I don't play games like Blade and Sorcery or Battle Talent. I find the style of combat entirely hollow and boring. There are a few chunkier enemies that required a bit more effort, but not really by much. As an example of how uninteresting the combat is, this footage is me fighting the first boss you encounter in the game. I'm just moving in and out, swinging to cause damage and back away without a hint of danger. Climbing mostly feels okay, except for the all too common VR problem of accidentally grabbing the weapon for your hip instead of the next rung on the ladder or wall. The second that happens, you're in Jank City, trying to stabilize yourself while not dropping your weapon. To swing from object to object in midair, you look at said object till it turns blue, then you aim an unarmed hand at it and hold trigger to activate your hook, a blue gravitational power that locks onto it. After that, just swing yourself and the game goes into slow motion to give you time to grab it. Now use the term grab very loosely here because half the time your hands aren't holding anything. You can use a thrusting climb technique on poles and banners where you just kind of throw yourself upward. This was pretty cool, but frankly it's not used nearly enough in the near 6 hours it took me to beat the game. Alshane, the bird I mentioned earlier, can be called to your position by holding an empty hand to your mouth and holding the trigger button for 3 seconds to whistle. At this point, he'll either give you a hint as to how to progress, or if you hold your arm out, he lands on it, and you can hit the Y button to see the world through his eyes, which will give you solves for various puzzles. As the gameplay loop goes, you explore a temple looking for keys to free prisoners along the way. By the way, holding the key just drove me nuts because of how bad it looks. And then when you reach the end of an area, sometimes with a boss fight, you get a portal back to your main hub area. The campaign has 15 levels, each of which will take you anywhere from like 15 to 30 minutes to complete, and as you kill enemies, their blood mana is absorbed into the gauntlet on your hand. This gives you experience points that you can cash in later. In addition to enemies, you have to do some light puzzle solving, most of which drove me nuts because the grab mechanics are so janky. Like here's me attempting to move a table to hold down a pressure plate.
Hey, I'm here! Please open the door.
And now here I am trying to rotate a 3-disc image to unlock a door. The whole game goes like this, and by the time I rolled credits, I was just relieved it was over. There is a skill tree system where you can unlock new skills with that mana I mentioned earlier. They broke it down by category, so if there's a specific element you favor, you can focus your upgrades there. This actually appreciated because I was able to tailor my loadout to my playstyle instead of being forced to fight or move a certain way. This does let you change up the mostly boring combat with more dynamic moves, but frankly the combat is super easy, so I was trying different things just to amuse myself. The music and sound design is okay, but right when the game started, I could not shake that I heard elements of the background music before, and then I figured it out. It sounded like it was ripped straight from Christopher Nolan's second Batman movie, The Dark Knight.
You'll have to climb that wall to get into the palace, Master Kasim.
Who are you, and how do you know my name?
Oh, I know many things, Master.
Wait, where are you going?
My name is Al-Shane.
In general though, the music fits the atmosphere of the game and wasn't really too repetitive. The voice acting though is a different story. In my review for Augmented Empire, I praised the strong cast of characters and the actors performing them for bringing those characters and the whole world to life. Ember Souls is the total opposite. Every character is monotone and boring, so almost all the dialogue scenes were putting me to sleep. Here's an exchange between your character and the first boss.
The prodigal son comes home at last. We're waiting for you, Kasim.
Captain?
The Sultan will be very happy when you give him the Windstone. It's the only one he was missing.
You are a servant of the Shadow Sultan.
Shadow Sultan has opened our eyes, and he has shared his power with us.
I must kill you.
I don't know how you've survived this long with how stupid and weak you are.
Your duty was to guard the Ember Stones, not allow yourself to be corrupted by them.
This will be your last impertinence. Your embers will feed my stone.
In terms of the story, it's paint by numbers, and I was afraid of this. I saw every plot turn, if you can call it that, coming a mile away. There's a procedurally generated roguelite mode that unlocks after you complete a few missions, and I would suspect that most players will just gravitate towards that and not bother to finish the main campaign. In this mode, you can unlock new weapons and items through the typical roguelike grindfest. While playing the campaign, I couldn't help but feel like the developers would have preferred to make a straight up roguelite or a sandbox game, and honestly I kinda wish they had, because there's nothing remotely interesting about the story campaign. In general though, I just felt like this game was a mashup of elements from much better games I've played in the past. The blood mana and hook movement felt like worse versions of Everslot. The combat was also reminiscent of Everslot, along with games like Dungeons of Eternity, Blade and Sorcery, and Nazgûr's Wrath 2, albeit without the latter game's complexity. Al-Shane's all-seeing eye mechanic is straight out of Shadowgate VR The Mines of Mithrak, and I can go on and on. So in general, would I recommend this game? Sadly, no. If you've already played all the games I mentioned earlier and you're desperate for something new, you can catch this one on a sale and you may get something out of it. At $25, there's enough content here to justify that price. The issue is none of it is terribly interesting if you played games like it before. Now in general, I think it's unfair to compare a game like this to Asgard's Wrath 2 or something like it because the budgets between that game and this game are vastly different. Having said that, there are games from other developers about VirtualAge's size that just look and play better than this one. So even though I did appreciate the skill tree and the general setting of the game because this isn't something I've seen in a lot of VR games, sadly the execution just really lets it down. If you have any questions about Ember Souls, feel free to ask down in the comments, but not before you hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more content. Thanks, and I'll catch you on the next one.